I'm Alex.
I'm Natalie, and we are Radio Free America.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our newest episode.
And today we have an amazing guest. Her name is Heidi Cuda, and she is a Emmy Award-winning investigative journalist, best-selling author, and filmmaker. She is the founder of Bette Dangerous, a leading investigative Substack read in over 90 countries, and the creator and host of Radicalized, Truth Survives, a podcast focused on disinformation. Her work has appeared in Los Angeles Times, Los Angeles Magazine, Byline Times, and international media. So Heidi, literally a couple hours ago, Donald Trump and American forces bombed Venezuela. What does news like that do to you? Does it surprise you? Does it do anything emotionally to you?
Well, thank you so much for having me on your show. And yes, there's always some what I call clickbait fascism that happens every single day. If you go back to 2017 and you recall that Donald Trump told his staff at the very beginning of the first administration to treat every day like the beginning of a new reality show, a new TV show, a new narrative where he vanquishes an enemy. So none of this is surprising. And actually, it's a really important question to ask, am I surprised or how I feel about it? Because I find if I am not surprised by any of it, then I can work much more focused because every day is designed to derail us, demoralize us, put us into despair. And when you find the so-called peace president, always bombing, always vanquishing, there's been, three that Nigeria, I think might have been Christmas Day or thereabouts. And of course, what he is doing and what he has been doing is committing war crimes. He needs to be with his friend Duterte, who is awaiting trial at The Hague, the former president of the Philippines. For Duterte is waiting for trial at The Hague for his crimes against humanity. He went on a killing rampage in his so-called war on drugs, which, by the way, Donald Trump congratulated him for, much the same as Trump has been doing in these illegal boat murders where we don't see any due process. We don't know who's really being attacked. And in fact, the evidence is showing that these are not these narco traffickers who Trump says, they are. And in fact, even if they were, we don't have any evidence of that. And they have a burden to prove it. And bottom line is these are war crimes. So I'm never surprised. It always kind of takes a moment where you kind of have to catch your breath. And wherever these events are occurring in the world, what we see is not so much war. What we see is bombs and drones and terror attacks for social media, for the despair value, for the fear, to demoralize people, to control a population. And I think that today is another day where we all woke up to what I call clickbait fascism.
Wow.
I love that term.
Clickbait fascism. I love it. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Yeah. This is a big issue in Czech Republic for me to explain to Czech people. Could you, in a simple way, kind of give us a glimpse of what went wrong with American legacy media and why it can't be trusted, and how long has that process been going on? Because that's something Czech people didn't believe me for a long time. Now they kind of see it in Czech media as well. So, yeah.
Great question.
What happened?
So, my background, as you guys know, I worked for a local Fox affiliate on and off for 15 years, for the better part of 15 years. And so I kind of saw how Rupert Murdoch and newsrooms functioned from the inside. And it might surprise people to know that most newsrooms are all the same. Somewhere at the top of the food chain, you have a guy looking at the right side of the ledger, seeing what is making money. So it's always designed to, be able to attract as many eyes as possible in the targeted demographics. And if it doesn't, even if it's important, it usually is then replaced with a story that might get more eyeballs. It isn't always like that. And so what we I'll just fast forward today and then I'll work my way back. What we are seeing right now is what I call the merger of Fox News, CBS, Rumble, and RT. So we are
Wow.
seeing the merger of the worst possible scenario for the population. And what that basically means is that instead of giving people the information that they need to make informed decisions, we are in probably the biggest experiment on mind control and population control than we've ever seen. And I would definitely include Elon Musk's Twitter in that because Twitter,
Yeah.
as I wrote in 2022, was going to become a Russian propaganda outlet under the guise of a social media platform. And that's exactly what we've seen happen. And what we see with these mergers, again, is these billionaires who own these media companies, they bet on fascism a long time ago. They bet on authoritarianism a long time ago. There are many reasons for that, and we can talk about some of them. But unfortunately, if you have been watching Fox News in America for many years, you probably have had your mind hacked to the right, and you could have been a perfectly decent American. You could have been somebody who voted for Clinton or Obama, but they started in on the outrage farming. And if you're their target audience, if you're an older white male, you suddenly have all these reasons to be very angry about immigrant mobs. And so that's one facet of it. And of course, you combine what we've seen with CBS and you combine what we're seeing with the Rumbles, which never stopped putting out RT, even as RT, Russia Today, the state operated, you state TV that is linked directly to Russian military intelligence. Even as that was banned in parts of the West, it was never banned on Peter Thiel and JD Vance's Rumble, so people could still stream it in the millions. But just to go back further, when I was in journalism school, it was the mid 80s. And I remember as I was graduating, I was at UC Berkeley and I was able to, be educated by some of the best journalists, really serious newsmen, New Yorker profile writers. Like I had access to really, an incredible talent pool. I remember just driving with one of my professors one day, and he said, all the mom and pops are being bought up by multinational corporations. And that is not going to be good for the media. So this is going back to the mid 80s, right? Well, what happened in that time is that all the media got bought up by multinationals. And at one point, you had about a half a dozen corporations running all the legacy media. And then, of course, you add the billionaires. I don't like calling them tech bros because that makes them sound too cheeky. You basically have these autocratic aligned billionaires who then purchased, the Washington Post and purchased Twitter. And Twitter was always a very imperfect platform, but it was kind of like a public square where journalists were able to get their work seen by many eyes. It had sort of a verification process. It was always very faulty. But Elon Musk came in 2022 and he brought back all the genuine Nazi accounts. He destroyed any verification process, so you don't know if you're actually tagging a government entity, or if you're tagging somebody who's just, adopted the name and is, a troll from Macedonia. So you have all these factors at play. And what happened is people did not realize that the CBS's and the places that call themselves news outlets or One American or Newsmax,
They
etc.
are just private entities.
They're essentially
Money
vehicles
making,
for,
right?
well, yes, money making's always been very important. It's a business, but what we see now is basically arms of Russian propaganda outlets. There
Oh my
was
God,
a
yes.
there were
CBS.
deals made and lots of smoky rooms where they just looked to the future and said, yeah, I view Putin actually as the contractor of these tech oligarchs who knew what they were doing with AI, for example, was going to be the biggest copyright infringement in history, and you better have an autocrat running the world and running the show than democracies, which will demand accountability. So we have all these people in lockstep. And now, if you're on Twitter at all, which is a place a lot of people get their media from, you will see actual factual Russian propagandists from the state of Russia, uh, communicating with, former generals. And you'll see the head of the FBI doing the same narratives,
Yeah.
the vice president. So in America, I think the biggest story of 2025 is that it's been captured by Russia, and they are in lockstep together. And going back to your first question about Venezuela, I always zoom out and say, how does this benefit Putin? What can he
Yeah.
do with this, or what is his role in this? I don't look at things, individually. I look at things as kind of part of a broader picture all the time, and that is,
It's
the
exactly
fact
what we
that
wanted to ask you. How do you get to your resources, or how in this engineered chaos do you create your picture of truth? Where
it's
do
such
you
a
get
great
your how
question.
do you get your orientation in the horrible chaos
Mm.
managed or engineered?
Well, people like you, Alex, are where I go. It's really interesting. It's an honor actually being asked to be the first person you put on this show, because as a woman in this business,
Ours.
we are often overshadowed by the men who do this work. And that's never been too much of a problem for me, because I felt like I could be more effective under the radar. Like, they'll look at me as the dumb blonde and then be surprised I'm still there 5 years later. But truthfully, what I do is I read history books. I am very close with historians. I'm very close with disinformation analysts all over the world. When I feel low, there's always somebody I can go to who can bolster me back up, and vice versa. So I get my information from networks that I have built in the last decade all over the world. And we have, many of us have different superhero powers. My superhero power is, this year I'm celebrating my 20th anniversary without a television. And what that means is that my mind is not always hacked or marketed or advertised to. When I am around televisions that have, advertising, and, quite often just even the network advertising, I still recoil. Now, I was in that business for a long time, so it's kind of weird.
Yeah, that's weird.
I was producing television news without a television, but it was like, uh, I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the only investigative reporter for the local, Fox affiliate. And then I also went on to Al Jazeera and other places. I wasn't the only one without a television. We knew, we knew how dangerous that these tools could be. And but I do want to say, for many, many years, I was able to do a lot of really good and important work. And then one day I couldn't, and I got out, and I walked out of the newsroom in 2013, and I never walked back in. I did a stint at Al Jazeera America, which was really important and fascinating, but I just knew what was happening. People were not getting their news that could serve them best from television. So I'd always been a print girl. That had always been part of my story. So I just went back to doing, primarily print,
Heidi, this
podcasting a
is
little.
almost all my questions are gone. So
Yeah,
Good.
I was thinking about that as well. What do I ask now?
More time for your audience to go out and have some fun.
What a professional. Okay, so I'll ask this personal question. I've really dug into this whole geopolitical situation for the last year, this excessively, and I went through stages of shock, and it's just so difficult kind of to carry the information, even if you don't have all of it, and it gets worse the more you know. What would you recommend people, or what would you, because this awaits everybody, I think.
yeah,
Oh,
Those who are
and it goes
yet
slowly
figured out, yeah.
further.
There's a huge psychological process pinned to it. How did you deal with it?
oh my gosh, thank you for that question. I was going to say something flippant, the Trotsky quote of war, you might not be interested in war, but war is interested in you. This is a global fight for the mind of everybody. These billionaires in lockstep with the oligarchs know climate change is real, know what they're doing with AI is, illegal on a million different levels. And so they looked at the future and decided that, they would create their sort of new feudalism. We'd all be kind of, scraping by as they're in their bunkers being protected. And so that is a daunting thing. And when I was asked, a year and a half ago, at Byline Festival, what would it mean if Trump was reelected? I said 1,000 years of darkness, and I meant that because I knew nothing good would come of it. Now we do know autocrats fall. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. But as far as how I deal with it, it has been a gnarly decade. It has been a decade where, as a member of the media, you don't normally talk about your personal, feelings about politics. You report on these stories. But in 2016, I found that I was a woman with a lot of experience as an investigative reporter, unshackled by a corporation. So I could press send on my first anti-Trump blog and warn people about this person. And I did on September 17th of 2016. So it's going on a decade in this fight. And I went from sort of being a media darling in Los Angeles, where I was working, to crickets. Nobody, nobody wanted to. Nobody wanted to weigh in on Trump, but I'd investigated him over the years. I'd known him to be a con man. I knew that he didn't pay people. I'd interviewed victims of the various schemes, pyramid schemes that he'd been related to. So, I felt a duty to warn, but I also did not want this person who owned beauty pageants, to be in charge. Anybody who rates women on a scale of 0 to 10 using the vocabulary of misogyny was just a non-starter for me. And that's where it began for me. And because I had a media presence, unfortunately, what that ultimately meant was that I was on the radar of people who did not want truth to rise to the top pretty quickly. So I have endured what appears to be a Project Veritas hit on my life that occurred in 2018 when I was
almost nothing about Project Veritas in Czech Republic. This is such a strange
well,
concept.
Alex, it's funny because it doesn't matter if it's Project Veritas or whatever you want to call it, but basically this is something that I learned from you that your audience will probably be very familiar with. The concept of Zersetzung, a way to kill the souls of activists, reporters, dissidents. And it doesn't matter if, in the case of my experience in 2018, I was working on a political campaign to get rid of Dana Rohrabacher. And those in the Czech Republic may know Dana Rohrabacher was a congressman who was known as Russia's favorite congressman because he
Putin's
always seemed to
favorite,
do
they
things
called him,
yeah. Putin's favorite, Russia's favorite.
a
And
horrible person.
so I had already been on the radar of people in Trump's orbit because I had not only petitioned to see the Cambridge Analytica ads compared to the Russian propaganda ads, compared to what Trump's people were putting out. This was all based on the 2016 election. And that was signed by people globally. But then when I took on this campaign, working with a candidate who was a really smart guy who'd been a director with the FBI, and he was a super lawyer, and he really had a good chance of winning this election. He was also Muslim American. And when I got on the radar of these people, they decided to target my life, both online and offline. And it resulted in a very, very traumatic period, but it also taught me what really matters. And what really matters really are where you are as a person, to make sure that even in this fight, you realize that every day is a gift and you practice that self-care that you need to practice. And sometimes that's just a walk or a meditation. Having allies in the fight, meeting people like Alex, meeting people like my friend Dietmar Pichler in Vienna, my friend Monique in Italy, all the guys that I work with as part of my team in the disinformation space. And every single, week or month, adding somebody new and key to the fold. When you have allies in this fight and you do it as a team, you never feel very alone. And it was very, very important that's kind of what I started assembling in 2018 was allies. And I did it by interviewing the people that I thought were the most important people to know. And then ultimately, I would do a interview with the director of a film called Active Measures, which really that film in particular helped get me through 2018. And your viewers will appreciate it because it shows what happened in countries like Georgia. It shows that America was not unique in any of this. It shows what happened in Estonia, all these target nations of Russian active measures. So when you see how this thing works and you start making allies in the fight, it becomes much easier to deal with the ongoing attacks. And one of the things that I have faced throughout this fight are the kind of the cyber militias on Twitter. And
This is what I
sometimes they
wanted
move
to ask you.
offline.
How
Yeah,
does it
yeah,
look
go
like
ahead.
when these people are targeting you, when they decide someone's gonna pay for this, right?
Well,
And
yeah,
they
someone's
are
paying for
really
it. Yeah,
professionals
yeah,
or people who are
yeah,
organizing, destroying someone's social life or
yeah,
someone's online
yeah,
life. How does it go? How is it happening? Because people here in Czech Republic still live in that virtual bubble that everything is somehow natural happening, like this.
yeah,
It's spontaneous movements of anger somewhere,
right.
anonymous anger. How could you be
Yeah.
targeted? How does it look like?
Well, first of all, we are all combats in this information war, this very invisible war to many. We are all combatants. And any of the nations targeted by Russia, who is backed up obviously by China, but any of the nations that are targeted by Russia, they tend to have democracy still. They tend to still have rule of law. They tend to still have human rights. They tend to still have human dignity and healthcare, etc. So there's a lot at stake when you become a target nation. And I believe that the whole world is being blanketed and targeted with this stuff. So people have to get out of their bubble. It may not be comfortable, but eventually everybody will have to realize it, some maybe quicker than others. But what it looks like, I mean, there's been so many variations, but you end up becoming somebody's full. I host a show called Radicalized Truth Survives, and we always joke that we're jobs creators, because there's a full-time cabal that hangs out on Twitter many hours a day, and their whole goal is just to disparage us, make sure that anybody who wants to support us or the allies that we have, anybody who comes on our show, all finds out that we're actually, they find everything they can to run malinformation campaigns. So if one of my podcast partners said something mean on Twitter to one of these people, well, that's screenshotted and used against us, et cetera, et cetera. And really,
Gossiping and lying about all of
really,
you. Yeah.
they can, when people pay attention to them, they can be effective. It can really be tortious interference where it makes it difficult. If you're working with people in the outside world, like I do on campaigns, they'll find out I'm on a campaign, they'll start targeting my candidate, et cetera, et cetera. It's really, truly pernicious. The people who do this type of work, I believe, are nihilists. I believe that they are angry, they're misfits, deranged. I mean, unfortunately, some of the people who've targeted me and my team are people I know in real life, have known since childhood. None of this should sound new to anybody where you're from, because these are things the Stasi did. These are things
Yeah.
the KGB did. None of this is new. It's just the methods of doing this type of work are new, where maybe somebody from the Stasi who would target a, reporter would, as Alex has taught me, go like, change the alarm clock so they wouldn't be able to get up for their job and get fired, etc., or set them up with honeypots or whatever. Now it's just all done and delivered through social media. I do think we have seen enough of this where anybody who knows even a fraction of what's happening in the disinformation wars, the great propaganda wars, will see a cell operating like this and realize most of them operate with anonymous names and not put as much stake in what they're saying as they might have, 1, 2, or 3 years ago. And what that will mean is that there will probably be more, targeting in real life. And it changes you in
Yeah,
ways
yeah,
that are unfortunate because your world gets smaller and who you trust gets
yeah.
smaller. But it
They're
also,
trying to strip you of followers, friends, of your good
and you
name,
know what? And you know
of
what?
of your
Now,
character, of your
now,
public appearance. They're just targeting
now,
every piece of you.
yes, but
Mm.
Alex, I have lost my country. So now it just doesn't matter. I don't care what they do. I knew when I pressed send on my first anti-Trump blog a decade ago that this was life or death, and what was going to happen in my country was going to be life or death. I knew that we were going to become like Russia. I knew all this stuff. I've been reporting on it for a long time, and I was able to put the pieces together. Now it's like I'm just getting started. I feel like a monster's been created. I am not going to stop doing this work, for anything. There's no troll online that can say something mean about me that's going to matter. And in fact, I learned from my friend Imran Ahmed, who runs the Center for Countering Digital Hate, who was just one of 5 people that the
Oh
Trump
my God,
administration
really?
said they were taking their visas away. Imran told me a long time ago, you get targeted because you do good work. If you weren't doing good work, they wouldn't come after you. And then my friend Jackie Singh, who does amazing work rooting out these characters and kicking the hornet's nest of these cyber militias, she told me, what do you care what people say about you who don't love you? So those 2 bits of information, you're targeted because you do good work, and what do you care what people say about you who don't love you, have sort of cured me of caring what paid operatives who lie for a living have to say about me. It just doesn't bother me anymore. I have too much work to do. I got a call. Uh, I got a call toward, I think it was the end of 2024, maybe right before the election, when I was doing a lot of work, um, reporting on all of the useful idiots being hired by Russia to lie to Americans about everything. And I got a call saying, one of your stalkers is out in front of your house live streaming right now. You got to get out. You got to get out. You got to go to your mom's, go somewhere else. And I thought about it because I'd already been to the FBI. I'd already been to, the local police. When you get death threats, you have to take them seriously. So you have to, talk to authorities. And they had told me, unless someone shows up at your door with a gun, we can't do anything. So I kind of sat there thinking about it for a minute. And I'm like, I got too much work to do to be, concerned about this. They're either going to show up at my door and mean business, or I'm just going to ignore them on the sidewalk because I had too much work to do. I was in the middle of a report based on a book from the 1940s where an Armenian American man went undercover into the Nazi movement in the 1940s and exposed it from the inside. And I wanted to get that report out to my readers. I'm now read in like 92 countries for my Substack. That's a real honor. And I wanted to get this report
Oh,
out. So I was like, I just kept working. Woke up the
you,
next day, had my coffee, went about my business. What are we going to do? We have work to
you,
do. We can't
you are,
continually be derailed. So
you are such a badass
Are you
woman.
I don't think so. I'm just tired, actually. I'm just tired.
are you talking about that? He was a lawyer and he created his own like small secret service groups.
No, no, there was a man who he went by a pseudonym. I'll have to find the work. Let me just try to
It's not
find
the
it.
one Rachel
It's
Maddow spoke of in
no,
Ultras.
I know who you're talking about. No, there was somebody else. I read as many history books as I can get my hands on, and so much of my work is informed by the female reporters of the 30s and 40s. Like I have been so
Interesting.
incredibly lucky in that regard. Bella Fromm's Blood and
Oh my God,
Banquet. She was a,
those
yeah,
fascists.
yeah, no, one of the best things I've done. And now I'm interviewing a Ukrainian historian, and every single week I've done this whole series with her. I'm putting out another amazing story. So I'm actually informed by all these incredible women reporters who reported on the Nazi regime in the 30s and 40s, people like Dorothy Thompson. One of my most read pieces was Who Goes Nazi, which was something she wrote in
Oh, that was
Harper's,
Dorothy Thompson. Sorry.
back in like 41 or 42, and it describes J.D. Vance to a T. Now, this is interesting. I called the report That Curious Feeling of Unreality, Undercover in Nazi America, 1938, 1943. I've still only done like the first 100 pages. I have to keep going back to it, but it was so interesting. The reporter wrote under the name John Roy Carlson. He has a Armenian name that's different, but that was the name that he used in 1943. And he said, I was about to witness Star-Spangled Murder with American democracy as the corpse, because that's how serious the fascist movement was in America at that time. There was so many things. I was given this book as a gift the night of the election from a friend of mine who didn't want me to spend that night alone because he knew, I've been fighting this fight for 10 years and we lost. In 2024, we lost. We saw America's surrender. And it's so frustrating because you guys know this. You guys know this. You guys are aware of this. You know that America was just another target country of Russian hybrid warfare. So you
We've
could
seen
see
it
it.
long before
Yes,
from a distance, and it was so
you know,
obvious, but
you
there was
know.
nothing we could do. We just screamed in the void.
Well, I mean, it all matters. The work matters. When I first started it, I was like, if I can just make one person listen, I will. And it's like, and then you build that one person to thousands who read your work. So it all does matter. When you talk about the despair, Natalie, when you talk about, what it is daunting because unlike the 30s and the 40s and even the 60s, we now have this extra layer of this, electro-fascism or techno-fascism. You have this extra layer of surveillance, and how we're going to see our
The
way out of that, I
mind
don't
control
know.
machine.
Yeah, but we have the power, and this goes back to something very important that I hoped we would be able to talk about. Alvarova led me to the writings of Václav Havel, who not only predicted what would happen in America, that lazy consumerism would be what takes us down, and television, and he was so right about that.
Text,
But
listen,
yeah, I
listen.
know. Right. I mean, incredible. The collected essays, The Power of the Powerless, was just such an incredible, important book. And I wrote multiple reports on it because living in truth and staying in truth is where we all have to be. And if we can live in truth and if we can stay in truth, then we will have to put pressure on whatever countries still have the rule of law to help those of us who've lost their countries. The people that are taking over these countries are part of an international, a transnational crime syndicate. They are criminals. Some of them are at The Hague as we speak right now. We need Putin and we need
Some
Trump
of them
to be at The
hopefully
Hague as
will.
well. They have to be. They are already, Putin has already been charged with war crimes. Trump's war crimes mirror Duterte's, who happens to be at The Hague. What he is doing mirrors exactly what Rodrigo Duterte is at The Hague awaiting trial for, these crimes against humanity. And so we can't believe that people have no effect on this. And the reason you by the Russian propagandists and the MAGA propagandists against the EU and against Europe is because you still have human rights, you still have dignity, you still have rule of law. In many of these countries, you still have an educated populace, and you still have the opportunity to protect your internet borders.
Shield
This
us.
is why they are to shield people. In America, we knew we had the ability to do something about it, and we did
You
nothing.
couldn't.
We knew what was happening, and we did nothing. We did nothing to protect our internet borders. And so people Our minds were
got
accessed
brainwashed.
by autocratic nations everywhere who had a free range. They just could completely target the minds of citizens who had no inoculation against this stuff. It's heartbreaking to me to think that
Yeah.
your country, which which gave the world such hope with the Velvet Revolution and people like Havel, could actually be duped again. But unless you have protection against, information warfare and inoculation against it,
Yeah.
no matter how smart you are, no matter what kind of
Yeah,
history you
yeah,
had,
exactly.
everybody's at
Anyone,
risk.
everyone. Yeah. And we've been like you, we've been duped for the second time
I
with the
know.
combination of Russian propaganda and the Silicon Valley machine, hand in
Yeah.
hand.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that is exactly right. And I believe that was baked in from the very beginning. I believe, and I'm sure that many reporters who have, been pondering this too would come to the same conclusion that decades ago at the birth of AI, or knowing where AI would
AI.
lead,
Yeah.
they knew that there would be this lawlessness. Well, you can't have that in democratic nations. You can't just take everyone's information and privacy in a rule of law country. And we all know that they talk about removing regulations. Well, where better to, remove regulations than in countries that never had any freedom? So in Russia, where, obviously you guys see all the chatter on Twitter about the EU and it's against free
Yes.
Yeah.
speech, whatever. You're
Mega. They
seeing
even
this.
call it mega, make Europe great again. So they don't
Oh,
even make any secret of it. They
I
already
know.
No.
declared this war to us.
I know. It's heartbreaking because we are all being targeted by countries that have no freedom.
Yeah.
Our
Yeah. They are
freedoms were
buying
exploited by
our
countries that
brains
have no
at
freedom.
scale.
I don't think I ever will. How does the mentality or the mind of such a person work? Why would you want to be so evil, beyond imagination? Like, I get the facts and what they're doing, but is there a way to understand how they function to
Well,
literally
yes,
decide the future of the world,
super great question. Multiple answers. Jim Stewartson, my podcast partner, has the simplest one. For some time in America, they've been sorting the sociopaths to the top. So
Hmm.
that's one thing. What somebody like Putin will have in common with somebody like Orban, in common with somebody like Trump, is they are all criminals. And what do criminals
They
want?
don't want
Well,
to go to
probably stay out of
jail.
prison. So if you are a criminal, then what you're going to do is everything in your power to stay out of prison. So what did Trump do? When he came to power with through his proxies on the Supreme Court, made it impossible to prosecute a sitting president, right? So what did Putin do when he first came to power? He made it impossible to prosecute a sitting president. What did Orban do? He made sure he locked up the media. You had to donate, if you were in the media business, you had to donate it to the government, because he could not have a free and
Mm.
fair press. So many of these guys, I believe that they close their eyes at night, they see Gaddafi, they see the Gaddafi ending that's looming for them. So I think all of them are very aware that they are criminals. Uh, Trump, who did nothing to
Our
protect
Babish,
people.
same story. Our oligarch Babish. Otherwise,
I'm
he.
sorry.
So we have the same at home.
I'm
Sorry about
sorry. No,
interrupting.
I'm sorry. No, you're not interrupting. It's just, it is, there are places to look though for hope. And I always go back to Little Moldova. Little Moldova had an oligarch also named Elon who had way too much power and was trying to influence elections. And instead of buckling, they charged him with fraud. They convicted him, doubling his sentence from 7.5 years to 15 years. And he
Oh
now
my
has to
God.
live in Moscow. So there are countries that understand this. Estonia, just a couple of weeks ago, convicted for three of their politicians for high treason, sentencing one of them to 14 years behind bars. And what did they convict them for? Because they were doing Russia's work in Estonia. And they
Oh
knew that
my
not only
God.
would this be a national security risk, but that it could destroy their democracy. So there are countries throughout the world that understand what's going on. And I always tell people now, if you really want to understand what's going on, interview a Ukrainian. And that is why I've been interviewing a Ukrainian historian. I'm learning not only so much about Ukraine's, history and the history of the Soviet Union, which, according to her, Tetiana Boryak, the Ukrainian historian, even the name the Soviet Union was a lie. And in fact, she says it was the greatest lie of the 20th century. There was no union. Nobody wanted to be a part of that. They
Yeah,
were
neither
occupiers
did.
pretending to be a democracy. And oh my God, how I knew that I'm still on the radar of the cyber militias is I wrote about how this Soviet Union name, even the name itself, should have been the
And
Russian state. It shouldn't have been Union. And immediately I got targeted by a cabal of whataboutisms. Whataboutism? What about the UK? The UK was a lie too. I wasn't writing about the United Kingdom's history. I was writing about the fact that my country had been taken over by Russia and that the Soviet Union was always a lie.
yeah, that triggers them so much. Right.
What an ending. Yeah.
Yeah. Heidi, that was awesome.
One thing that I didn't say that I'm going to say real fast is that I knew that it was over in my newsroom when the reports and the investigations that I would do to help consumers would get bumped down into the C block, and they were starting to lead always with the live report behind the scenes at American Idol. When they were leading with the entertainment person as opposed to what would be helpful to people to not get harmed or injured or scammed, I thought, wow, this is over. And that happened in the mid 2000s. So we've had 20 years of this saturated propaganda drip. And, I just
Yeah.
encourage people to find
Yeah.
news sources that they trust and find allies they trust because the multinationals are not your friends and the billionaires are not your friends.
Yeah. Time to say thank you. It was, as
Thanks,
I
you
said, that
guys.
was mind blowing. Uh,
Oh, that's really
Thank
sweet of
you.
you. No, women
Thank you
in
very
the
Okay.
much.
fight are very important. Thanks, guys.